Hello everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel YNR Daily Spoiler. Not Noah, that's the shocking truth sending Juna City into chaos. In today's Young and Restless Spoiler, let's go!
Not Noah, the father of Sienna's unborn child, has caused quite a stir-wire spoilers. The morning's revelation, not Noah, had landed like a grenade. It was followed by the retraction of the paternity test, and then the unmistakable confirmation. The child she carried was Adam Newman's. The story spread through headlines, phone calls, the Forrester walls of the Newman compound, and into the corners where secrets remained. Sienna hadn't wanted this. She had desired dignity. She had wanted to control the narrative, because she had witnessed firsthand how quickly a life can be rearranged when other people decide to speak up. But dignity in Genoa City was expensive to buy, and even easier to lose. Sharon and Noah stood outside the cafe under an awning as rain began to fall. The sight of them together turned the shutterbugs feral. Sharon's face was tight with worry, and Noah, who was usually composed, now had the hollowed expression of a man who had a future scripted for him, and then watched it change. "You did everything you could," Sharon said softly, her voice with the brittle edge of someone attempting not to scream into the storm. "You demanded a retest and respected Sienna. That reflects who you are." Noah did not respond immediately. He observed Sienna across the glass, rubbing her palms against the ceramic mug. "I keep wondering," he said finally, "whether telling the truth would have made a difference sooner. If I had asked different questions, where would we be?" Sharon reached for his hand. "You were honest. That matters." In Genoa City, honesty was currency. But it didn't always get you what you wanted. It sometimes brought pain. Sometimes it didn't buy anything. Victor Newman read the society pages with surgical precision, making people in lower offices appear like children watching fireworks. When the paternity confirmation arrived for his secure line, Adam, not Noah, the man who had built an empire on leverage, cracked a thin, almost amused smile. The world tipped on its axis. A new perspective had emerged. And Victor had never been one to pass up an opportunity to rearrange the pieces. He called Adam immediately. "Do you understand what this means?" he inquired, not so much a question as a test. Adam's voice returned, threaded with the exhaustion Victor had heard before. "What I set in motion, Dad," he said quietly. "I need to do right by her." Victor considered it. "Doing right by her means doing right by the Newman name," he went on. "You understand what comes with that. Responsibility is not negotiable." Adam bristled. "Do not lecture me about responsibility." "Then show it," Victor replied. "Show it publicly." Adam did not want to go to the circus. He wanted to make amends in small, humane ways. Public statements stung like antiseptic, disinfecting the wound but leaving an ache. But Victor had plans, legal, financial, and reputational. And Adam didn't need another battle with his father right now. Nikki tried to temper Victor's desire to take advantage. She placed a hand on Victor's arm in the living room that evening, with the sunset over Newman Vineyard visible through the curtains. "This isn't a business deal," she explained quietly. "A child is involved. We don't use babies as leverage." Victor's jaw tightened. "Nikki, we protect what's ours." "We protect a person," she clarified. "A newborn will never consent to being a pawn." Victor looked at her, a soft fissure passing over a mostly stone-carved face. For a moment, he was a man who had learnt the cost of allowing power to dictate his every move. The old calculation returned. "We tread carefully," he said, which Victor Newman interpreted as a surrender. Marcus, Sienna's brother, arrived at her flat with boxes of herbal tea and grocery bags, a form of domestic armor that served him well. Marcus had never been one to stand on ceremony. He was practical and grounded, which Sienna sometimes envied. He sat opposite her, watching as the woman who had once navigated the city's parties now paused in a world reduced to appointments and questions. "Did you tell Noah first?" Marcus asked without preamble. Sienna looked at him with a tired expression that made him flinch. "Yes." "And Adam?" Marcus' tone was softer but sharper. "Did you tell him?" "I told him," she explained. "He's trying. Sometimes he tries his hardest in the worst ways." Marcus slammed his hands to his knees. Why him? You understand who Adam is. Because not every mistake is the same, Sienna explained. I felt something that night. Because I awoke to a blurry world, he was present, and I made a decision. And now there's life inside me, and I'm trying not to let my mistakes turn him into a casualty. Marcus sat back silently. He had expected blame, but he had not anticipated the sheer human plea. You don't have to defend yourself before me, he finally said. You must protect that baby. And if Adam is going to be a part of this, he must be here for the right reasons. Sienna nodded. I know. At Chancellor Winter's, the solicitors moved like chess pieces. Jack Abbott and Diane Jenkins' firm, or rather, Jack's cautious consultation with Diane, was inundated with phone calls. Chance and Devon debated the ethical implications of public declarations versus private protections. A paternity case, if mishandled, could result in a tidal wave of tabloid coverage and court filings. Jack, ever the man who saw an opportunity in a risk, advised caution. This is about Sienna's welfare, he told Noah in an office reeking of expensive coffee and litigation. These are not headlines. This is not posturing. If Adam is the father, and the tests confirm it unequivocally, then we must devise a plan to protect her and the child. Noah's response was measured. I'll do whatever she needs. I do not want custody battles. I do not want press photographs of me in a courtroom. I want to protect her. Jack nodded. We have her medical privacy sealed. We limit what is disclosed. And if Adam begins to act like the father in public for the sake of image, we will ensure that he is legally held accountable. Noah looked at Jack with exhaustion, making the man appear younger than his age. What if he doesn't? What if Adam's impulses indicate that he is both present and absent? Then the law will help, Jack said warmly and firmly. However, the law moves slowly. We need to move faster. There were those who moved faster than the law, tabloids and social media engines that didn't need permission to roar. Sienna discovered celebrity cruelty in comment threads and breathless, contrived headlines like Newman baby bombshell. Which Newman? Sienna's secret, each more hungry than the last. It was corrosive. It attempted to tear her into pieces she didn't recognize. One evening at Society, a tabloid journalist pressed a camera against her face while she waited for her appointment. Miss Crawford, can you comment on Adam Newman's alleged paternity? The man was relentless, as if he had grown accustomed to treating people as property. Sienna inhaled the city scent, which included coffee, rain, and 1,000 minor violences. She collected herself and walked out the back, ignoring the flashbulbs. Privacy, she discovered, was the most difficult thing to maintain in public life. Faith Newman sat sipping tea inside the cafe, like a woman on the verge of becoming more than just a spectator. She had been taken aback by the news, of course. The Newmans were family, and news spread quickly. But Faith had also discovered, as many others had, that Adam's world was complicated in ways that did not always provide clear solutions. She reached for her phone and sent Adam a message that simply said, "Are you okay?" It was the kind of question with 1,000 tiny weights. Faith wanted him to change, just as people wanted the sun to rise because they decided it should. Adam read the message at the Newman estate, standing by a window overlooking a rain-slick lawn. The small flat of his conscience was louder than his father's pronouncements. He had always been the type of man who acted first and then asked for forgiveness, or, worse, acted and then convinced himself that everything could be rationalized. This time, there was a child involved in the fallout, and rationalization felt mean. He drove to Sienna's flat that night. He brought nothing but a bouquet of cheap daisies and a sincerity that tasted raw on his tongue. He knocked, and when she opened the door, it felt like he was entering a place where he didn't always fit in. "Sienna," he said, the name a human sound he had rarely allowed himself to make. She looked at him, and he could tell everything from the line of her jaw and the wary set of her shoulders. "You don't get to sweep in and fix this with flowers." "I know," he replied. "I'm not trying to fix it. I'm trying to be honest. I'm trying to be present." "You say that," she remarked, "but you vanish. You show up. Then you go. Her voice had the brittle honesty of someone who had been wrenched open and bandaged with promises. Adam's shoulders sagged. I apologize. I do not have clean hands. I did not go into this with the intention of becoming a father. But now that I know, I do not want to be the type of man who runs. Sienna stared at him for a long time, weighing the risk of his truth versus the risk of his absence. Genoa City had a habit of allowing men like Adam to persuade themselves into redemption while avoiding accountability. Sienna desired change and someone who would show up every day. Words would not be sufficient. Prove it, she finally asked. Not with statements. With habits. Adam nodded. I will. The public theater in Genoa City continued. Victor arranged a carefully worded press release that was more measured than people expected of him, while Nikki emphasized tact and dignity. At the same time, rumors of legal strategy floated down the well of conversations. Could Victor, the master strategist, take advantage of the situation to secure favorable positions at Newman Enterprises for Adam? People were both repulsed and fascinated by the idea. Sienna declined Victor's first offer of setting up a trust fund for the baby. I don't want money from Victor, she replied flatly when he offered a private meeting. I don't want a gilded cradle. Victor's expression shifted in an arc that she couldn't read. I am offering stability, he finally said. I do not provide handouts. I offer leverage. I don't want leverage, Sienna explained. I want a father who is present. Victor's voice softened, but not completely. You will have both. Weeks turned into a schedule of appointments. The city gradually learned to compartmentalize its outrage into headlines, and then recycle it. The baby bump became a private calendar on Sienna's phone. She saw counselors, prenatal doctors, her mother's nervous, exhausted wisdom, and occasionally Adam, who tried in small ways to integrate himself into the fabric of her life. He arrived for an ultrasound appointment and sat in a waiting room that smelt faintly of antiseptic and the past. He watched as the grainy image of their child filled the screen, and his expression brightened as if by miracle. Noah also saw the ultrasound image, which Sienna chose to show to him privately. He traced the outline of the tiny hand, and the sight of the fragile life caused him to breathe with grief and gratitude. He's beautiful, Noah said quietly. Whatever this is, I want to be someone she can count on. Sienna felt the shape of a family that would be difficult to define as she looked between the two men, one steady and kind, the other volatile and achingly human. She reflected on how, in a world of legal briefs and tabloid columns, a human life could become the most radical act of vulnerability. Be better, she told both of them. They both took charge in their own way. Not everyone opted to be better. There were some who smelt opportunity, while others smelt drama. The tabloids continued to circulate. A shadowy figure from the private lab that had mishandled the initial test called a reporter late at night, implying corruption, and whispering about someone high up who wanted Noah to be declared the father. The paper published the piece as if it were a ceremonial execution, and the city speculated on the motives: jealousy, protection, corporate strategy. The lab tech, a small woman named Irene, arrived in the newsroom with trembling hands and a tired expression that made her appear older than her years. I didn't want to get involved, she told the reporter in an unpolished, breathless interview. But I couldn't live with my mistake. There were orders. I was told to change labels. I was advised not to worry about it. The accusation had no name attached, yet, but the implication was as clear as a red light. Who stood to benefit from tying the Newman name to a scandal? Who had a reason to protect Noah and not Adam? Irene's testimony would be delivered slowly, with subpoenas, cross-examination, and legal wrangling. But more than anything, it altered the narrative. Someone had attempted to engineer an outcome. Jack Abbott, already wary and suspicious, dug deeper. He called in favors, private investigators who moved through the city with the kind of procedural zeal that made men like Victor pause. In the background, the threads of corporate warfare tightened around individual lives. The most intimate scene of all took place in the quiet of a hospital room on a damp October night, when Sienna held her newborn for the first time. The child's cry was a small, perfect sound that temporarily drowned out the city's noise. Noah stood like a steady lighthouse near the window. Adam, close enough to touch, but not imposing. Marcus, both proud and fearful. And Sienna's mother, clutching the edge of the bed like a talisman. Sienna looked at them, and the small life on her chest, a pink, wrinkled miracle, restored humanity's currency. He's ours, she repeated quietly this time. Not yours. Not mine. Ours. Noah took a tentative step forward, resting his hand on the infant's blanket. His touch was respectful and full of affection, which paternity tests had never defined. I'll be his uncle if he needs it, he said, humor threading through the tenderness, putting a lid on the complicated ache he carried. Adam's face was about to break. I don't want to be anything less than his father, he said, a simple confession from a man who had realized that some consequences could not be avoided. I will be here. Sienna looked into Adam's eyes for a long time, seeing not only his father, but also the man who had to accept responsibility for the life that came with his name. Prove it, she said softly, not as a demand for legal bonds, but for the daily small things that make up a real life. Showing up for appointments, changing nappies at 2 a.m., and being present when the child cried without making a grand gesture of self-congratulation afterwards. Adam nodded. I will, he said, and the room heard a vow made voluntarily rather than under duress. Outside, in offices and apartments, the city recalibrated. Victor lit his cigar in a manner that conveyed both calculation and surrender. Jack watched legal maneuvers, like a conductor in the middle of a score. Sharon and Noah learned to keep their alliance quiet and loyal. Marcus became a defender. Sienna, exhausted, guarded, and absolutely luminous in the way that only new mothers are, carried a child who would grow up in a town that relished spectacle, where family names could be both a shield and a target. Genoa City would find a way to make this headline again. There would be custody posturing, settlement offers, and the slow drip of Irene's investigation, all of which could point to those who attempted to shape the truth for their own ends. But for the time being, in a small hospital room where fluorescent light made faces strangely warm, a newborn was more concerned with lungs, hunger, and a small insistence on life than with legacy. Sienna gazed at her son, then at the men who would orbit his world. He's not property, she explained. He's a person. Her voice was steady. And he will be loved properly. The boy, impossibly small and perfect in all the unknowable ways babies are, let out a tiny, satisfied whimper and settled, as if he knew exactly what he had to do. Exist, be loved. Complicate every plan and motive with the simple, undeniable fact of life. In a city that thrives on narrative and headlines, the lack of spectacle was disorienting. It was ordinary, clumsy, and sustained. It was, simply put, human. And in Genoa City, where scandals bloomed and withered like ephemeral flowers, human moments like that stuck, as stubborn as glue, in people's minds. The story of Not Noah had detonated. It rearranged alliances. It had introduced a Newman into the world and brought more than one family name to light. There were going to be battles, lawsuits, private reconciliations, public apologies, and security offers from men with checkbooks and hearts. But for the time being, the newborn slept, and Sienna, with Marcus by her side, took a deep breath for the small life she had chosen to protect, rather than for the press or the lawyers. Outside, the city was buzzing with cars, gossip, and ambition, but inside that hospital room, the world had shrunk to a fist-sized miracle. If Genoa City had rules, one of them might be that once arrived, innocence softens even the toughest expressions. As the sun rose the next morning over a skyline that had witnessed more secrets than it deserved, someone in a lab office slid a file across a desk with trembling hands. Irene's revelations had only just begun, and like tides, they would keep coming in.